La segunda ponencia, que versa sobre la regulación de la amapola en Turquía, está a cargo de Steve Rolls, quien es máster en estudios del desarrollo por la Universidad de Manchester y la licenciatura en ciencias sociales por la Universidad de Bristol. Steve Rolls tiene una trayectoria de 20 años en Reino Unido como Senior Policy Analyst for Transform Drug Policy Foundation. Mr. Steve Rolls, welcome to Mexico Senate.
Thank you very much. Apologies for speaking in English. My Spanish is still terrible, even though I've been working in Mexico for a number of years. So I'd like to thank my translator. She's amazing. And if you need to get translation, please get it now. Next slide, please. Who's on the... Do I have a clicky thing? Anyway, I was just going to say, my organization is based in the United Kingdom, but we operate internationally. We produce a range of policy analysis, and we are involved in advocacy in a range of public and political forums, advocating for an end to the war on drugs and more effective and humane drug policies. We have been in partnership with a Mexico-based organization called Mexico Unido contra Delincuencia. I'm sure many of you have heard of it, MUCD. My MUCD colleague, Tanya, she's speaking, I think, later today. We've produced a range of publications. Sorry, can you go back one? That have been translated into Spanish in conjunction. No, you've gone forward. Go back, sorry. Okay. So just a few introductory comments, just key facts. Some of this has already been covered this morning, and Itzhak, I'm quite angry with him because he's covered some of the things I'm going to talk about. So I'll move quickly over those things. But opium is a fascinating plant. It contains a whole range of active drugs. It's a bit like cannabis. It's not just one thing. It has many different active drugs within it. The key ones are codeine, which you will know because it's a very well-known painkiller. Thebaine is a similar opiate compound that is used to synthesize oxycodone, hydrocodone, and hydromorphone, three very important opiate painkillers. And it also contains morphine, which is a painkiller, very useful painkiller in itself, and can also be synthesized into diamorphine, which is known as heroin. So heroin is the drug which is used both medically and non-medically. So it's a fascinating and useful plant that has a medical history that goes back hundreds, if not thousands of years. In recent decades, historically, around half of global opium production has in fact been legal and regulated for the medical market. So many people perceive that the opium economy is mostly illegal. Actually, about half of it is entirely legal and regulated. The proportion has shifted somewhat more towards illegal production in recent years because Afghanistan has had a series of very large opium harvests. But nonetheless, there is a vast legal opium market and the parallel illegal opium market. And the differences are very striking. The illegal market is associated with organized crime, funding of terrorism, violence, all kinds of socially corrosive activities of organized crime groups, and many problems. The legal regulated market is essentially like any other plant-based pharmaceutical market. It is regulated, it is taxed, it is not associated with any organized crime activity, violence, or terrorism. So these are the same products, but very different markets. Next slide, please. So this graph is the main countries producing opium. And I appreciate you may not be able to read the bottom bits, but on the left here is the legal opium production, and on the right is the illegal opium production. This one here, this big one, this is Afghanistan. Yeah, just go back out again, it's fine. This is just Afghanistan, just to show the domination of Afghanistan in global production. Now, my INCB colleague here will probably correct me on some of this data. This is the most up-to-date data I could find, and it was from the INCB reports and the UNODC reports. But because of Afghanistan distorts all this, I've got the next slide, please. So this is the same graph, but without Afghanistan. If we can just ignore Afghanistan. I know that's probably stupid, but just so you can see what's really going on. Here are the legal countries, and this is the illegal production here. And in red, this is Mexico. So Mexico is already one of the big producers of opium. Unfortunately, it's all illegal. But as Itzhak mentioned, the legal production, Australia, France, India, Hungary, Spain, and Turkey. We're going to say a little bit more about that. Total legal production of opium currently is around 400 tons per year. It goes up and down quite a lot, depending on INCB quotas, depending on previous year's harvests, depending on stockpiles. But it is in that kind of area. It's actually come down quite a lot in the last few years, from around 700 or 800 tons to around 400 with the most recent data. Most of the legal production is poppy straw. So this is just dried poppy plant. Some of it is semi-processed into what is called concentrated poppy straw. There's only, I think, one country that legally produces opium gum, which is when you scrape it, you slice the flower and scrape it off in the traditional way, and that is India. I think all the other countries produce poppy straw, but maybe the INCB guy will correct me. Next slide, please. I wanted to put this image up because there's two images here. On the left is, these are some UK soldiers, British soldiers in Afghanistan. We've been in Afghanistan since just after 9/11, and part of our mission in Afghanistan, along with the coalition forces, the US and others, was to eradicate or reduce production of opium. And many of our soldiers have been doing this for years. Many of them have died, fighting a war against drugs, a war against opium in Afghanistan. This picture on the right is a field of opium poppies. It's about 20 miles from my house in England. And this is legal production of opium in the UK. And some of this opium production in the UK is then used to make heroin, diamorphine, for medical uses, for pain control. It's used for mothers when they give birth. It's used for surgery. It's used in veterinary science. And some of it is used to prescribe to heroin addicts as a form of medical treatment. So on the one hand, we have soldiers dying in Afghanistan to eradicate poppies, to stop heroin addicts in the UK getting heroin. And then we also have fields of opium growing near my house to legally produce heroin to give to heroin addicts. It really doesn't make much sense. Next slide, please. But if we have a choice, I think anyone would prefer to have a legally regulated market rather than a chaotic, illegal market controlled by organized crime. This slide is about the UN treaty requirements. Itzhak's talked about this quite a lot, so I'm going to go through this quite quickly, and we have our colleague from INCB here as well. Under the UN Convention of 1961, any country can produce opium under the auspices of the International Narcotics Control Board, or INCB, or Jiffy. I don't know how you were pronouncing it in my translation, but the INCB, I hope that translates properly. Jiffy. And production has to be under the auspices of a national agency. The amount of production is determined by INCB quotas, which are in turn determined by member state requests. All domestic production in terms of imports and exports and storage must be recorded and reported to the INCB under the auspices of a national agency. These things are quite bureaucratic, but they're not especially difficult. As Itzhak mentioned, there are 14, I actually said 18 countries, but I'm not sure what the exact number, but it's around that many countries are doing this already. And the INCB offers technical support and guidance for countries that wish to do it. So it's bureaucratic, but it's not especially difficult in terms of the international legal issues. There are, however, some practical considerations and security concerns in terms of a legal opium market. Poppies are a very hardy plant. They will grow almost anywhere. You can grow them in the deserts of Afghanistan, and you can grow them in the tropics. You can grow them in the United Kingdom, in that field near where I live. So literally almost anywhere. The poppy plant is quite bulky when it's unprocessed. So it takes about an acre, 1 acre of opium poppies to produce 1 kilo of opium. So there is not really any particular threat from opportunistic criminals stealing opium poppies from the field. You don't need security around the actual farms. The farms are not themselves a security issue. Unlike, for example, cannabis, where the actual the plant is used in its raw form, it's not significantly processed, and if you steal 10 plants, that is already worth quite a lot of money. It's very different with opium, because it needs significant processing before it becomes a useful drug. Raw opium is it is a valuable commodity. A kilo of raw opium can sell for many thousands of dollars. And there are then security concerns, which does point to the fact that if we were to move to a regulated market in Mexico, having the raw material as poppy straw or the dried poppy plant might be more sensible from a security perspective than having raw opium. And the traditional illegal opium production in Mexico, as I understand it, is the raw opium gum produced by scraping from the flower. So that is more of a security issue. So moving to the dried poppy straw would probably be sensible. Once the poppy straw is in a production facility, security concerns are, I think, quite small. The production facility can be secured, and once it has been processed into morphine or methane or hydrocodone, it is really similar security issues to any high-value pharmaceutical. And Mexico and elsewhere are very familiar with those security issues, so I don't think those are too much of a concern either. Next slide, please. And I hope you can, I don't know if you can read these slides.
No sé si se pueden leer.
Not as bad as Itzhak's slides, I must say.
Bueno, están chiquititos las letras del orador anterior y yo, el mío también. Bueno, aquí vemos que hay desarrolladores ilícitos. La India y Turquía. Se mencionaron que tanto India y Turquía tienen hasta cierto punto han logrado de una manera exitosa una transición de ilícitos a lícitos, un mercado lícito para usos de mercadotecnia médica. Esta producción es muy diferente al tipo de producción que vemos en el Reino Unido o lugares como Tasmania en Australia. En vez de tener, por ejemplo,
they have huge fields, industrialized production, with combine harvesters. It's much more like established industrial food production. But in Turkey, as it's explained, they have made this transition. I'm not going to go into too much detail as it's covered most of it. But Turkey now has, I think, between 70 and 100,000 small producers, licensed producers. They're licensed each year. Every year they have to get a license. They all produce a small amount, on average only half of a hectare of opium. And there are around 600,000 people who earn some income from the legal opium market in Turkey. And it has created around $60 million annually in export income. I'm not going to go into that actually because it's covered it. Turkey reduced its illicit production, according to the UNODC and the US Department of State, to almost to zero. So their illicit production effectively was almost eliminated completely. So it does suggest, the experience of Turkey suggests, that an orderly transition from illicit traditional production to legal medical production using the same farmers is possible. Next slide, please. But what are the specific challenges for Mexico? I don't think there are any significant practical or bureaucratic or political obstacles to developing a domestic legal production in Mexico. But Mexico will have to make a series of decisions about the nature of their production and the nature of their market. Mexico will need to establish a national agency to oversee the licensing decisions, and that will be working with the INCB. That agency will have to make decisions over who gets the licenses, where is the opium produced, and what form of opium. Are we talking about raw opium? Are we talking about poppy straw? Are we talking about concentrated poppy straw or something else? And what would the scale of the production be? How much of this production will be for domestic use and how much of this will be for export use? And there are a number of issues there to do with quotas and demand and supply and so on. There is a separate issue which Itzhak touched on around domestic demand for opioid medicines for pain control and palliative care. There is clearly, I don't know the details of this, I'm not going to speak about it, there is clearly undersupply of opioid medicines in Mexico. And many people who need opioid medicines for pain control, particularly in end-of-life care and palliative care, do not have access to. And that is a major problem. It's a major problem. But dealing with that problem, it's not so much about domestic production of opium. That is a separate set of domestic questions. And actually, answering those questions is probably just as difficult, if not more difficult, than the issues you face around establishing opium production, because there will need to be significant changes in the institutional structures, the training of doctors, to allow for the necessary provision of opioid medicines to meet the need in Mexico. So that is a separate but very important set of challenges and questions. Next slide, please. In terms of the potential for transitioning traditional Mexican opium producers into a new legal medical market, the Turkey example in particular,
el ejemplo de Turquía en particular nos está mostrando que es posible, pero claramente, como se dijo, México está en una situación muy diferente que Turquía. Es razonable proponer que por lo menos algo de la producción en México puede venir de este tipo de productores ilícitos. Exactamente cuánto, no quiero especular, pero hay una serie que tienen retos importantísimos. están operando en diferentes áreas geográficas remotas, en Guerrero y en otros estados. Están operando en áreas, digamos, marginalizadas desde el punto de vista económico, social. Hay una cultura ilegal y una cultura de violencia con estos grupos. Esto se experimentó hace mucho en Turquía, pero aquí se está experimentando. Hay una gran hostilidad hacia el Estado, hacia la policía, hacia las gentes. No los ven como aliados, los ven como enemigos o como un gran reto. Entonces tenemos que ver este tipo de gente marginalizada y hay que traerlos a una vida burocrática. Es muy difícil y es un gran reto. No digo que sea imposible, pero que es difícil, es muy difícil. Y necesitan traer a los productores ilícitos. Bueno, no lo tienen que hacer como en Turquía, pero debe de haber un potencial para hacer la transición correcta de esta procesión. Requiere, desde luego, un nivel nacional de intervención, más de una agencia estatal, para satisfacer los requisitos de la Convención de Naciones Unidas. Y yo creo que sería sensible producir esto. Por ejemplo, el puppy straw o la amapola, o, por ejemplo, otros tipos de producción en esta área. Tenemos que hacer que las autoridades locales y los granjeros, los campesinos en sí, tengan lecciones de las mejores prácticas, entre comillas, para poder mejorar la situación actual en México. La participación de las comunidades, planes de inversión a largo plazo tienen que ser parte de un aspecto de multiagencias y programas de apoyo con dinero. Hay que, esperar que funcione bien, no tiene que ser de inmediato, pero hay que trabajar muchísimo en ello. Mi última diapositiva es la que señala un gran problema. Aún cuando se tengan todos los productores ilícitos y haya transición de todo esto, van a tener un problema, porque la demanda para heroína médica no ilícita va a permanecer, y mientras la demanda exista, una oportunidad de utilidad existe para los carteles. ¿Y qué sucede? Que la producción no va a desaparecer, simplemente va a ser desplazada de donde está a otro lugar, y los campesinos van a extender su producción, o probablemente la producción se va a desarrollar en otras regiones o en otros países. Y vale la pena recordar que cuando Turquía hizo esta transición de ilegal a legal, lo que sucedió es que la ilegal que se movió de Turquía se movió directamente y significativamente a México. Turquía a México. Los productores no ilícitos a un mercado médico ayudan, pero no se elimina el mercado ilegal. El mercado ilegal debe de ser desplazado, pero eso lo tenemos que corregir, porque los carteles van a seguir produciendo opio ilegalmente. Esto hay que cuidarlo. Y luego hay un elemento que da esperanza, un brillo de esperanza. La producción en Norteamérica, bueno, una crisis de respuesta a opioides incluye el recetar el opio derivado de la, amapola. Esto puede ser utilizado como forma de tratamiento. Esto, por ejemplo, se utiliza en muchos países de Europa, en el Reino Unido. Hidromorfina en Canadá, o se prescribe el opio como un sustituto, un fármaco sustituto de la heroína. Se han hecho varias pruebas y se han utilizado estas pruebas positivamente y bien en Irán. Han expandido este tipo de recetas en Norteamérica, en Estados Unidos y Canadá, y por otro lado en México hay que tener estas medicinas y quizá vamos a tener este tipo de beneficio a largo plazo en ambos lados de la frontera, porque estos aspectos de la demanda van a variar de este tipo de provisión médica con opioides, y México también se movería de una producción ilícita a una producción lícita para apoyar la ayuda médica. Todo esto tiene que ser, México tiene que trabajar, México, Estados Unidos y Canadá, para expandir la producción legal en México y poder lograr este aspecto legal en toda Norteamérica, México, Estados Unidos y Canadá. Muchísimas gracias por su
Thank you very much. Welcome.